Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about the psychological benefits of training with chains. We could talk about the physiology, we could talk about the biomechanics, all that stuff, but there's something else that needs to be discussed with chains. And it's funny because I see it on social media with other coaches, other lifters, and stuff that I have, like on my Facebook, of when the topic of chains comes up, the word badass always gets used. Gets used a lot. Or sexy. I've actually seen female power lifters and some strength coaches who I know who are female say there's just something sexy about training with chains. Saw another personal trainer say, yeah, I like to deadlift with chains a little bit, just a chain over the bar, even though I'm not that strong on deadlifts, just because it feels badass. Now that's an interesting thing, and people would say, well, why does that matter? Or they say, oh, that's just silly. You're going to do something that's trying to be hardcore. Well, let's come over to the point. If you're doing something in the gym with your training that may actually have benefits, because there are benefits, that in your mind and in the mind of a lot of people, it's like, yeah, that's just kind of badass. Or some chicks go, that's just sexy. Or it feels hardcore. You don't think there's a placebo benefit to that? In other words, I like training with chains, and I always say that for orc mode training, chains are a central part of the orc mode training. As I started calling my training that, they're central to it. Why? Because it's just something different about chains. You got chains hanging there. You can hear the metal. You can hear the metal of the chains piling up. It's like, if you guys remember C.T. Fletcher talked about he just likes the sound of the jingling of the plates. Just hearing that metal. It's psychologically motivating. Something psychologically motivating there. You can hear those chains piling up and moving, just like you can hear the plates jingle. Something about that metal hitting metal. You've got all of that. Well, what about the awkwardness of it? I mean, when you use any sort of heavy chains, you guys do realize those chains swing, right? It's also fighting against that stability. It's minor when you got a little bit of chains. What happens when you start putting 50, 60, 70, 80 pounds of chains? Like I'm doing in some of these, right? Like on those benching, that's 77 pounds of chain weight. Right, think about that. That's not just 5, 10 pounds of chains, 77-pound chains. That same thing on those squats that you saw in there. You're also dealing with stabilizing that, getting it stable. Again, there's something hardcore about having to deal with that. You hear the chains, the sounds they make, you have to get tighter. You have to get tighter to lift against heavy chains. You do. Yeah, we have the contrast weight and everything also, but there's a psychological benefit to seeing those chains swing, to looking at it. The sound that it makes. If you feel that you're getting a better workout because a workout is more hardcore, you're doing something that forces you to stay tighter, forces you to stay tighter, to keep it more stable. Because if you get tighter, the chains stop swinging. And then you can lift the weight. These are all psychological cues. Right? This can lead to better performance. You guys remember the study that we talked about with the placebo, with the fake anabolics being given to guys? And all the guys in the group who were told they were given anabolics and were given a sugar pill made better size and strength gains than the other guys? Think about that with the chains. And that's before we get into the physical benefits. That's its own thing. Think also about the psychology of having to work against chains that will pull you off balance and forces you to get tight, get stable on every rep. And it doesn't unbalance you once you get stable. It also teaches you to get tighter. Learning tool. Then we also deal with the fact that oftentimes our total lockout weights are heavier than we can normally lift. You're having to deal with the feeling of a heavier weight in your hands on a deadlift or a bench, the top. You got to deal with the heavier weight sitting on your back on a squat. Even if it's only 10 pounds more at the top than you would normally have done for those number of reps, whether it's a single, whether it's a 5. We deal with that heavier weight. We psychologically prepare ourselves to lift heavier. We've got all that happening with chains too, don't we? The psychological aspect. You guys remember in Joe DeFranco's documentary called Strong many, many years ago, and he had an NFL player who trains at his gym talking, and he had said that, there's something different about doing all this heavy chain training and stuff. He goes, when I get out on the football field, I feel like this gives me an edge because I know I've done some hardcore training and trained with chains and bands and all this crazy stuff that the other guy across the line from me hasn't done. And that gives me an edge. Now, that might sound funny, but that's a multi-million-dollar contract athlete going out on a playing field about to hit another guy with a multi-million-dollar contract. If we want to talk about hardcore, those are pretty hardcore athletes. American NFL is a pretty hardcore sport. That's not bravado. These are guys who are hitting each other hard out on a playing field with years and years of experience for big money too. Said he feels it gives him a psychological edge because he's put himself through that stuff that this other guy hasn't done. And if he feels it gives him an edge and he has to hit that guy on a playing field, if he believes it gives him an edge, does it count? I think that it does. So when we start looking at stuff like this, you can't discount the psychology. Can't discount the psychology. There's something badass and hardcore about training with chains that does go beyond the contrast weight benefits. It goes beyond teaching us to accelerate better, because those are all physiological. Those are all physiological. Psychological. It is hardcore. It's orky, if we want to put it that way, the orc mode, the mindset. There's a mindset to it. There's a mindset, and it matters. It matters a lot. It's one of the reasons I use chains so much. One of the reasons. It's why it's my preferred way to do all my max lifts. I want to feel that heavy weight at the top. I want to hear those plates jingling. I want to hear the chains piling up. When I see the bar loaded in those chains on it, I think of that as an industrial thing in a lot of ways. I see the bar loaded up and a bunch of chains hanging down. I've also worked in an industrial environment. A lot of people don't know that. I've worked as a hydrogen and natural gas compressor for quite a few years. Okay, it's something I've done in the industry. When I see chains hanging around, I think of a workshop. Okay, that's what it puts in my head, based on my own life experiences. So when I see those chains there, I know that I'm ready to go to work. Okay, I'm ready to go to work. We're in a foundry or a forge. We're in a mechanical workshop. We're here to build stuff. We're here to do work. It's one reason when I wore shoes, I used to wear the boots. I don't do it now, because now I prefer barefoot. I think barefoot's better for training. the boots. I'm there to do work. And I think chains can replicate that same thing. And I see a lot of other people who say that, and these are serious, some of them are serious athletes. I've seen at least one person say that who holds multiple American records in powerlifting, actually a woman who's a coach. She said that. Something hardcore and sexy about chains. Do not discount the psychological benefit of things like that in your training. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.